Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about Pakistan's recent success that we've seen as far as FATF is concerned, the ramifications of that, of course, and the ripples of that we've seen across the border also, especially Indian media, least to say that they're not pleased across the border, the kind of we are seeing the kind of attacks come from the Indian media. We'll be talking a little about that also, and the conspiracies that are coming from across the border. Also, of course, Pakistan's constant struggle and the part we've played as far as war on terrorism is concerned, our sacrifices, financial terrorism, overall the ramifications of this decision that has been taken pursuant to, of course, the visit by a team of the task force. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me Abdul Jaleel, who's a public policy expert. Thank you for joining us today. We also have with us Ariba Shahid, who is a business journalist. Thank you for being with us. And we also have with us Dr. Waqar Ahmed, who's Joint Executive Director, SDPI. Thank you for being with us. Jaleel Sahab, of course, everyone has heard from yesterday, and we are, of course, before that there was speculation about it, and then the very welcome decision that has come as far as the FATF is concerned. What are the overall ramifications? Of course, as far as our, situation at home is concerned, our domestic situation is concerned, it's unlikely to have many ramifications there. But internationally speaking, of course, it's a huge deal for Pakistan, is it not?
Oh yes, it carries FATF. This is a financial action task force, basically constituted as a result of UN resolution in order to check the growing relationship between the terrorist outfit and their financial sponsorship. But the government, and it has, I would say that it carries both plus and the minus aspect for us, or results for us. For example, when I say the minus, in fact, it has been used by the big powers or the Western country in order to strangulate Pakistan economy because of our non-conformity with some of their policy objectives. Certainly, and there are certain geopolitical reasons, compelling reasons for us to pursue our own national interests. For example, our close relationship with China, and CPEC is one of them. And that was an irritant, it is still an irritant. That was an irritant, and the West did not want to have the emergence of a new economic bloc in the region. So I will say that India too, of course, being a country which has never recognized our existence, in fact, have also used FATF to promote its own agenda there with the help of the Western countries.
And we've seen how unhappy they are with this recent decision.
But anyhow, there is always say there is a silver lining in the dark clouds as well. As a result of it, what we have done is that we were able to bring a lot of transparency over our economic system. Now, all financial transactions or major transactions, wherever they take place, in the business sector, mostly they are well recorded and they are reported back to Federal Board of Revenue, whose job is to tax them, number one. And it has, number two is that it has helped us to check a lot of tax evasion. And number three is that it has also helped us to upgrade and to improve our financial accounting system as well. Unfortunately, previously we did not have that robust financial accounting system. And the government, I will say, over this period has brought a new accounting system in various ministries, in the government institution as well, which is more transparent, more responsive, and more accountable as well, and very well harmonized. Number three is that the inflow and outflow of foreign exchange, that was another gray area in which it was difficult to, it was something which was causing a lot of suspicion in the Western market as well, that the money laundering is taking place, illicit money is going out, and of course, Pakistan our economy have suffered a lot as a result of the outflow of the foreign exchange from our country as well, and everybody knows that how much money has been laundered. But unfortunately, we were never able to retrieve that loss or our financial
Right.
loss.
Let me come back to you, Jaleel Sahab. I'm going to go to Ariba. Ariba, I hope you've been listening. We've been talking about the ramifications of this decision, both domestically, if there are any, and of course on the international front. How do you look at it in the sense that, I don't want to talk about, of course, we've also unfortunately had a lot of, since the decision itself came out, it would be remiss of me not to mention that there has been this constant credit, whether who's going to take credit for this. And, that's irrelevant considering, of course, that it is for Pakistan a huge deal internationally. And, we should all acknowledge what it means for us, regardless of what political party, what political affiliation anyone may have. We've also had the Prime Minister say that, it means a huge deal for all those people who've been working tirelessly. And I think by those he means the officials, of course, who have been trying their best to satisfy the financial task force and to ally their concerns over the points that have been raised. All of that said, overall, how do you look at this internationally speaking, on the international front?
On a domestic front, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of credit taking happening. It's us that did it or we did it. I think that is irrelevant at this point because, of course, political parties spearhead the processes. But it is important to know that the bureaucrats, the people in the offices, are the ones that are actually implementing them. For instance, the people at the State Bank who are looking at the AML, anti-money laundering and compliance, KYCs, etc. Those are the people that are relevant for this. They should be the ones taking credit for it. Similarly, the people at the banks, the private sector, the ones that are doing heavy compliance and being, tough on customers, even if that's costing them business, these are the people that you should be thanking for this as well. But yes, of course, political decisions as well are important in the sense that it does matter to some people to take credit. That we'll leave that up to them.
Right, right.
But in terms of the fact that getting out of the gray list, or avoiding the possibility of the blacklist itself, it showed that there was more to than just ticking off items off the list, because as we see right now, Pakistan is more compliant than most countries that are not even on the gray list, and that's because of the strict actions that we were asked to do. And the fact that it took Pakistan this much time to get out, or even to get, to see the ray of hope of getting out, it shows that there's an international lobby at play, which did its job. The FATF grey listing, or the FATF potential blacklisting itself shows that there are other people who are important, that have influence over these global bodies. But it's glad that Pakistan has been playing their cards right. They've not only attained all those steps that they needed to do, but they've also been lobbying themselves on a foreign policy perspective as well, the right messaging across. So it's great news. But yes, because of COVID-19, they could not have an on-site visit earlier. So it is very important for them to do an on-site visit right now,
Okay,
because the
how
previous one could not
important
happen.
is this on-site visit? We'll come back and talk more about that. Let me go to Dr. Bakar. Dr. Bakar, one of the things that Ariba mentioned is that, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. So one of the things that Ariba mentioned was that, there's of course a lot of politics involved, and we've talked about this before as far as the FATF is concerned and the retention on the grey list is concerned. Therefore, when we say that, they're satisfied with the conditions that Pakistan has met, the conditions, they're satisfied with them, and then pursuant to that, they're okay with sending their having an on-site visit and then putting us out of the grey list, is a lot of. So how do you look at it in terms of that background? What are we doing right now in terms of lobbying, in terms of having, putting our right narrative forward? How do you look at it in that sense? Because the politics of the task force itself, I mean, I think we can all agree on that it is there, it is a reality, right?
Yes, that's right. And I think all institutions have played their role in really improving. I see this as glass half full. At least the process is going in our favor, and there are favorable outcomes ahead. But I do believe that you're not out until you're really out, because we have been there. We have been to that point where we were once taken out of the status list, but only later we found ourselves, just a couple of years down the road, we were back in this list. So there were actions which had to be done and we were not compliant on them. So there's no room for complacency, if I can say over here. And I believe that on-site visit is something also which requires a lot of preparation. It's not going to be easy. The due diligence process, and the steps that go into really making that on-site visit a success in favor of.
So when we say when we talk about an on-site visit, it's not something that we can presuppose, like you are saying, because in a lot of quarters it's being presupposed, that it's going to be a mere formality. It's not. It's going to depend on the on-site visit, you're saying.
Absolutely. I mean, it's just like my auditor. I mean, if I go to audit my company or my organization, there are things that he would do as a desk review, and I'm supposed to pass on the documents or email them the documents. But then there's due diligence which that auditor would do on site and come to my office, would look into my finance, look into my HR procurement files. That's a harder part, actually. And we need to prepare our institutions for it. So while I'm really happy, I'm really glad, but I see this as glass half full.
Okay. Let me come back to you. I'm going to go to Jaleel Saab. Jaleel Saab, that's interesting what Dr. Waqar has said. He's saying that, because we are all looking at it, I think at least I was, and a lot of people have been looking at the on-site visit as something that is a formality. But he says that, it's not really. And there's a lot, riding on it. And also the fact that, it's we've been here before and they've been retained. So in that kind of a scenario, and of course politics is there, how do you look at it?
This is, as earlier on I have said, that there is always a silver lining in the dark clouds. There are two aspects as well. Some serious negative aspect. For example, it was an effort to squeeze our economy as well as our economic institution. And mostly the ill effects are being felt by the NPOs or non-profit organization or voluntary organization, those who are delivering philanthropic service of philanthropy in the system as well. And now, the bank laws have become quite complicated for them. Money transactions, lot of NGO working in Pakistan on the social welfare project, they were receiving money by way of zakat and other from the expatriate Pakistani. That has been blocked. As a result of it, I know many welfare institutions, even orphanage, which were suffering on account of shortage of the fund. So it was.
So you're saying domestically then it translates that way?
But it was, I would always say, we carried out a lot of debates with the people, with the finance ministry. And I said that it is your duty at least to make them conscious about the suffering or the negative impact which it is causing to our vital function of our social welfare institutions. And then the government, of course, government have the previous government, as a result of it, they have taken some good step as well. For example, they brought.
But what does it mean, really? In terms of, will it translate at all in terms of our own economy, in terms of the situation on the domestic front?
You would say the framework, what the FATF people say, that they would say that your economy has got a lot of non-transparent portion, which have to be made very transparent through documentation, through proper accounting system, as well as through proper monitoring system. And the inflow and outflow of the foreign exchange is not, and it is not well monitored. As a result of it, the government have introduced an Anti-Money Laundering Act, which is quite effective. But again, it is also affecting the expatriate Pakistani who are sending money for investment in this country as well. And the government asked now, I would say, that initially the FBR or the income tax department would not ask questions that from which source you are earning money and you are making investment.
You're saying that in terms of transparency, we've really tried to be more
But the transparency should not become an instrument of, I would say, it is an instrument of
torture.
Blackmail. Sometimes, the people feel that they are being questioned beyond, beyond necessities as well. From how much money, how you are earning this money, how many years you are being, we need foreign exchange. We need, and expatriate Pakistanis, they have contributed immensely. And majority of them, they are working in as a professional or a labor in different country as well, and it's a recorded fact. And the government, but as a result of FATF, the inflow of the foreign exchange, it has lessened.
Okay, let
but
me
it's
come
the
back to
duty
you.
to facilitate them. I
Ariba,
would say there is some
ji.
kind of a disconnect in communication system as well with those FATF authority.
Okay, let me ask Ariba. Ariba, do you agree? You think that it's possibly a disconnect between our communicating to the FATF team on the kind of problems that we are having, and of course, like Jaleed Saab said, when we talk about transparency, it shouldn't become an instrument of torture. But then, of course, we've had to try and satisfy them on the conditionalities, and of course, there is the politics also.
Mahrukh, it's actually pretty interesting that um, in order to increase financial inclusion, we need to have accounts that are anti-money laundering and KYC, know your customer compliant, right?
Right.
These difficulties with getting people on board into the financial net or into the documented net, they're very difficult because of the limitations imposed on us by the FATF. Now, these difficulties make it difficult to onboard people. It's a chicken and egg problem as well. So banks, the central bank itself, they're having trouble bringing people on board into the system and to increase the documentation, increase the transparency in the country. People like you and I, we struggle with regular banking tasks as well because of the stringent checks that are put onto us. Like, for instance, any remittance that comes in, it takes more than 3 to 4 days for it to actually drop in. Things like these are very severe, and they hamper the ease of doing business as well in the country. But like getting out of the list through the right communication, through the right messaging is really important. In the past, what's happened is that the FATF is looking into Pakistan, and the media, obviously not at fault, but like the media reports about instances of, let's say, terrorism financing, things of the sort that are still happening. So you can't really expect to get out of the list when the problems that you're hoping to set out are still very much part of the main primetime news. So that also is important. But yes, like I'd like to add on to Dr. Vakar's point that the visit is definitely not a token visit. It's not just a mere formality. It's highly important because of the fact that the FATF has not visited Pakistan for a long time. The on-site visit is crucial. This is just wordplay at this point. So I think we should hold off the celebrations until it actually does happen. But this is a good omen. So yes.
Right, let me come back to you. Dr. Vakar, what does an on-site visit entail, really? Are they going to be visiting banks? Are they going to be looking at overall financial transactions? How does it work, really?
Yes. So primarily, they would be visiting your oversight institutions, those that deal with finance and non-finance regulation, central bank, CP, your asset oversight mechanism and the related institutions such as the one that you had in your Prime Minister's office. Then at a second stage, they would come down to your government audit and account departments, including the AG Accountant General offices. Then, of course, this not only includes the civilian budgets, they would also require some, of course, cooperation in terms of looking into your defense spending as well. So I think all in all, the entire government machinery has to gear up to really face this, because the 34 action points really require a coordinated effort. And in terms of budget spending, one can't say that it's only one tier of the government. No, it's not only the federal government, it's also the provincial governments that will have to play a role in really satisfying those who are visiting us.
Dr. Vakar, even in terms of, if we look at, when we look at money laundering, which is a huge part of, one of the concerns that was raised also during the FATF, we're also looking at various cases of money laundering at this time that are currently going on. Do you think that, that's also something that they will be looking at, because it seems to be one of those points that was earlier raised during, I think, last year when, again, there was this session and they looked into whether Pakistan would be retained or taken off?
You're absolutely right. Now, in terms of law or the legislation that has been done to curb money laundering or terrorist financing, for example, they were very satisfied with the legal progress. And it's really the practice or the implementation of this legislation where we had lacked. And this is where the question of capacity also comes in. And I think your earlier question, a large part of these are not just public sector's responsibility or regulators' responsibility. Things get twisted when, of course, private sector players come in. And, of course, we have seen that banking systems were asked to be strengthened. So I believe that when it comes to the practice of money laundering and its laws, the private sector banks, including insurance agencies, including non-financial banking institutions as well, all of them need to really practice the law, the legislation in letter and spirit.
Okay, right. Let me come back to you. Jalil Sahab, what about the reaction we are seeing, the conspiracies against Pakistan? Of course, you know, that has been a huge part of our struggle with the FATF also. You know, India's traditional role, our fight with, you know, against terrorism that we have been consistent with. How do you look at it, their role at this time?
You know, as I have said, that this was basically, this is a financial task force, but I would say that the Western country have actually, partially they have used this to manipulate our economy and consequently manipulates our politics as well, and objective of the foreign policy as well. You know, they have their own foreign policy agenda according to which they want to run Pakistan, and certainly we have to seek where lies our own national interest, and we have to press for that. And India has played very negative role in this respect, and I would say India, on behalf of the Western country, was the first one who have moved case against us that our name should be placed on the grey list. However, the Indians are sponsoring terrorism, and they have been supporting terrorism in Pakistan, and it's a known fact. Even the ex-American Defense Secretary is reported to have said that India is sponsoring the terrorist outfit in Pakistan, but no action has been taken against them as well. So there is a clear contradiction as well, and I would like to say that the Pakistani media and Pakistani Foreign Office in this respect have got a very big responsibility, and they must, the big responsibility, and they should take initiative in mobilizing the world opinion, especially the Western world opinion in this regard as well.
But when we talk about asking others to take initiative, what about, you know, particularly us? What about have we not been able to further the narrative the way that we should have?
There is, in fact, I would say that you know very well that on the floor of United Nations, the ex-prime minister, he raised this issue that the developing country and the developing economy are depleting from their resources, and especially the money which they get from the donor agency. In fact, it only touched the soil of the developing country and come back into the Western Bank, and we have got no mechanism to retrieve that stolen money. And this is the story of Pakistan as well, and this is the story of most of the developing country as well. However, the West is in this, I would say that there is a clear contradiction. The West is not ready to impose a money laundering law when it comes to the question of our right as well. They will not share information easily with us, right? And secondly, they will provide safe haven to those people who steal money from the developing country and you know, launder this money to the Western country, and they have created a number of haven in this respect for making investment in their interest as well. So I would like to say that in this respect, Pakistan alone cannot fight this battle. Pakistan has to, Pakistan must raise the issue with the help of other developing countries as well, who are sailing in the same boat as well. But in any case, Pakistan, over the year, we were able to improve our financial governance system as well, because this has helped us not only to improve our accounting system, our taxation system, and the money laundering culture, which was in fact depleting us from our resources. It has also helped us in improving our even the the improving our system of recording at a microeconomic level as well. But still, a lot needs to be done there.
Right. Ariba, what about, we're talking about narrative building, we're also talking about the role India has played, in our retention on the FATF grey list also. In terms of that narrative, what is it that we have not been able to do successfully? Because of course, India as a sponsor of terrorism is something that, the world can close their eyes to, but it's a reality.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Like India is able to import fuel from Russia, but the same Pakistan can't because of sanctions. I feel that the point of privilege that they come from is widely distinct from where we come from. Our country has suffered enormously through the wrong messaging that has been pushed out by international media, that has pushed out by our neighbors. So there is that, you can't ignore that. Absolutely, you cannot ignore that. I personally feel that our relations with China as well have further dampened these sentiments towards Pakistan. But then again, these relations are for the long term. But India has used its muscle in a very strong way to damage Pakistan economically through placing it or pushing for it to be placed onto the FATF grey list and eventually even pushing for it to be placed on the blacklist. But I feel that the government, the people behind the compliance have played an enormously important job by doing everything that the FATF asked them to do. And it's very important to note that this is the kind of exam where you need to score 100 marks to get out or pass. So there's not a type of exam that you can get 50% and you're out. This was an enormous task. This was a great task that Pakistan's been able to achieve and even headed towards achieving. So one can't deny that India had a strong hand in this, and one can't deny that this was more of a geopolitical and foreign policy related issue than an internal issue. But it's great to see that Pakistan is headed in the right direction.
Right. Dr. Bakar, what about our foreign policy? We've also, proactive foreign policy. We've also seen, Bilawal Bhutto undertake numerous visits. We've also, whether it's China, whether it's Saudi Arabia, there is, as far as our foreign policy is concerned, do you think that also has had a role to play in terms of our narrative building is concerned, in terms of, our own a narrative that goes out into the world as far as against terrorism is concerned, our efforts against terrorism, that also, and the terrorism that flows from across the border is concerned?
Yes, I think we have come a long way, and the global forums now understand that Pakistan's foreign policy is not just defined by its neighbors, or it's not as they used to call it once. It was India-centric, or the Afghanistan and the state of the region was defining the foreign policy. It's much more broad-based. And if one looks at the national security policy, the NSP, I think it's fairly broad-based. It really goes miles to really tell the readers that the narrative, the broad thrust of Pakistan's foreign policy is now around economic security. And economics, or rather geoeconomics, is something which Pakistan really puts its weight behind. And I think it is this thinking that has defined our relationships in the region with China, with Russia lately, with Central Asian republics. But I think you talked about Foreign Minister, and Foreign Minister was recently asked the question whether, for example, the relationships, foreign policy relationships, which the previous government had undertaken in the region, most notably with Russia, where would that stand now that Pakistan is trying to sort of woe the sentiments or partners in North America or the European Union region? So I'm very glad that he was very clear about it, that whatever partnerships we are forging or strengthening across the region, they would remain, and we would look forward to really reach new heights in those partnerships.
Right, and a united front, of course, we've also, Jalil Saab, we've also been talking for a while about the fact how whether it's economy, whether it's foreign policy, whether it's, on any front, when we look at it, whether it's domestic or international front, we need, or economy also, we need to have a joint front, regardless of our political, as far as whoever's in the government, we need across the board political unity. We need a united front on the international scene also, whether it's, because like Dr. Waqar is saying, owning the decisions that were earlier taken, owning the decisions that are now being taken is essential to that kind of continuity and the kind of united front we want to portray to the world.
This is very important aspect of this question as well, because we have suffered a lot because of our failure or our weak responses to the propaganda offensive which has been launched by India as well. Being our enemy, it's an enemy from the very first day, which who wanted to isolate us from the world community and from the international market as well. So it is the duty of the, it's the, what we have to do is that we have to give a coordinated response. The different government institutions must coordinate their activities in order to give a comprehensive response to the world. For example, a lot of Pakistani NGOs or Pakistani lobbies, expatriate lobbies in the United States of America, in England, they're very strong. They have got a very strong presence there. And we have got also people working in their media as well. And I don't think so that we have ever tried to approach them and mobilize their support for this cause. This is the duty of the Foreign Office as well as the ruling political parties, to approach them and to mobilize them for this public to mobilize public opinion in support of Pakistan stand as well. Pakistan is the victim of the terror financing. India is one country which has sponsored, everybody knows, which has sponsored terrorist outfit throughout the, almost for 2 decades, 1.5 decades, we have seen waves of destruction, subversion in our country, and that was being sponsored by India as well.
And
we have got evidence as well. Kulbhushan, everybody knows that he was running a big network in our country as well. And International Court of Justice have recognized our
So when we talk about our narrative on Kashmir, for example, when we talk about our narrative on terrorism that's coming from across the border, that India is responsible for all of those things, we need that kind of united front, and then consistency also.
Consistency, the government agency should also provide them a facilitating support, but the private agency, private organization, they should also come forward. There are a lot of think tanks in Pakistan, and I think they should also participate fully in this respect. We do not give a coordinated response. That's why it doesn't carry much impact as well. Then the media too, is, I would say. The media
also, of course, has to play its role. Ariba, what about, I think Jalil Saab is right. He talks about a coordinated response, across the board unity among private and public, organizations, but also a consistency in terms of the owning up to the policies, also of, whether whatever government there is, of there being, that kind of consistency that doesn't break with regard to Kashmir, for example, with regard to our foreign policy, with regard to our stance on the terror that is coming from across the border. I don't think that there are two opinions on that.
I think in the past few years, Pakistan has somewhat developed rigidity in its stances. Like, for instance, its stance on Kashmir has stayed the same regardless of how difficult things have been. And even with a government change, I think the stance has stayed roughly the same. And like Hina Rabbani had recently said that, we'll continue with the same, the same progress. I feel that that is really important as well. But yes, it is important that we have a single unified stance as far as our foreign policy is concerned. As far as issues of national security and issues of national concern are related. So for the FATF, for the fact that Pakistan is not a terrorist financing hub, Pakistan's a country where people are out here trying to do meaningful work, we need to have a strong unified stance on that. And I feel that the Charter of Economy is a step towards that, to make everyone join together, sit together, and hopefully realize that the bigger picture is Pakistan, not political clout.
Right, Dr. Vakar, what's your take on this? Of course, we've been talking about Charter of Economy. We also had the Prime Minister talk about it, the importance of it at this time. But of course, there is that, of course, the other side of the argument that every government has the right to have their own financial policy, all of those things. What's your take on this in terms of the unity at this time, in terms of the consistency? Whether it's foreign policy, whether it's economy, whether it's our stance, our narrative on terrorism from across the border is concerned, Kashmir is concerned, all of those things.
Yes, I think we are standing at a very important time in history. And this year's budget, federal budget, has demonstrated that the country can actually reach some form of charter of economy, given that this budget was given by a coalition government. So previously, when we used to think that politics and economics, these are really partisan subjects, and it'll be hard to arrive at a consensus. But this time around, we have really seen that a coalition not involving one or not two, but more than two parties, has been able to arrive at a consensus and give a coalition budget actually suggests that, yes, we can move towards the Charter of Economy. That's one. Second, if you look at the economy chapters of
Dr.
most
Vakar,
of
let me interject for 1 second, and then you can continue. But what about, I mean, of course, that's one way of looking at it, and I think it's optimistic also. But, we also have to acknowledge that we are living at a time when we are, very polarized in terms of our politics, in terms of, our ability to, get along with each other, in terms of our political parties being able to continue and work together in tandem, all of those things. Do you think that it's possible in that kind of an environment that we are seeing?
Yes, I think most of the independent economists, and including the donors and development partners, have been reminding us to depoliticize economics, really depoliticize the reforms around economy and business if we have to move ahead. And I'm happy to see that if you look at the manifesto documents of most of our political parties, now what they are writing about economy or the way forward in the economy is quite similar to each other. For example, there's almost a consensus that there has to be a focus on export competitiveness. There is a focus on improving public finance management, belt tightening around expenditure, for example. So on most of these things, political manifesto, party manifestos are coming around. So I think it's best that this subject is now discussed in detail in our standing committees in both Senate and National Assembly. And there should be some minimum set of indicators, economic indicators, around which a consensus is achieved.
Right, let me come back to you. Jalil sir, I think what Dr. Vakar says and what Ariba said is essentially true. But, we have to acknowledge that we have a large chunk of our major opposition is not even in the assemblies at this time. So when we say that, these issues should be discussed in the standing committees or they should be discussed in the parliament, we are missing a large chunk of the opposition at this time. So we don't have their input, we don't have their, considerable support or, criticism, whatever one may call it, within the assemblies, which would be productive even if they had disagreement or agreement, whatever. But at least there would be, some dialogue, there would be an alternative opinion, all of those things.
This is a very good question, and it's I would say that it's a source of much concern in our country as well. Political party has not evolved itself to which could in fact enable, I would say, which could enable the country with a good financial governance leadership. I mean to say that each political party all over, if you see the developing country, each political party, they must create a working group of the people who are expert in this field, let's say international management, economic management, or the international or in public policy as well. And they should continue to work it, and from time to time keep the movement of the idea on, keep the movement.
Do you think we'll come to a point?
Unfortunately, there is a complete gap. I would say there is this is a structural flaws within the political system of our country, that they do not organize their activity on, they do not organize the group on various public policy issues as well, on financial policy, governance policy as well. As a result of it, they have to totally depend upon the information of the
For example, we've seen,
bureaucracy.
as far as the economic situation is concerned, as far as doing away with the subsidies are concerned, as far as, the price hike on fuel is concerned, when by and large most people agree, economists agree, and that this is a decision that had to be made in terms of our IMF our program and continuing with the IMF program, there is still politics being played on it.
There is a lot of politics, and I would like to say the politics, but the question is that whenever you create any public policy, it does have the impact as well, and it should be calculated as how much damage it would cause and how much benefit it would cause to the public.
And when will we have our political parties rising above their own party interest to what is in the interest of the country at this time?
That's a major flaw with our political culture as well. They are not ready to go beyond their own turf as well. That is why I would say that the time has come that the political party should create the group of the expertise there, and those groups should sit down and they should talk like a good policy maker as well. Because the modern states, modern state is not an easy business to run as well. It needs a lot of knowledge. It is, as it is said, the modern societies are based upon the fundamental of the knowledge, and without expertise you cannot run.
Do you think it has to do with democracies maturing? Let me go to Ariba. Ariba, do you think it has to do with our democracy still not being mature enough, or do you think that do you think we'll ever get there? How do you look at it?
So I personally feel that I would feel that democracy matures in the country when a single prime minister completes 5 years of service in the country. I feel that this instability also makes Pakistan's image in the global market seem unstable. So regardless of whether you're in the grey list or in the black list or the white list, if you don't show political stability, foreign investors are already offended and pushed back by a country. So that is also considerably important, because when the grey list, the white list, the black list, etc., they impact how foreign investors see you as a country and how they see their investment in the country. And with no political stability or with an immature democracy at play, you are already pushing them away regardless of your status on the FATF. So it is of utmost importance that the Pakistani politicians that we have, they start demonstrating maturity, they start demonstrating sustainability and durability in the process and the whole democracy mechanism that we have going. Because this mechanism works in most countries around the world. The same parliamentary system works in most countries around the world. So it makes no sense as to why it cannot in Pakistan. So in place of these changes, in place of the fact that Pakistan was on the grey list for so many years, the workarounds were our institutional bodies coming up with holdco, opco operations that enabled foreign investors to feel safe, but the safety is a temporary bandage on it. The long-term thing would be political stability.
Right. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much for being with us. Abdul Jalil Saab, thank you for joining us. Ariba Shahid, thank you for being with us. Dr. Waqar, thank you for making the time. Overall, in terms of our, of course, the decision on FATF is certainly welcome. And we are all hoping that on-site visit will go well for Pakistan and we will not be retained on the grey list as it seems likely. But overall, of course, we've also talked about how political unity and consistency in terms of our foreign policy, in terms of our narrative that goes out into the world against terrorism, our efforts to combat terrorism consistently that Pakistan has made, all of those things must continue. And must be owned by all political parties. The efforts that are made also that are being made at this time must be acknowledged, and that kind of united front is essential not only for our political success in the world, but also for our internationally, but also for our economic success. Let's hope that we can build on that. Let's hope that we can work towards that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Perspective.